So Denis has some issues with the MCU, and as always, it's being, I think, a little exaggerated in terms of what he said, and what he did not say, and what he means and what he does not mean. So let's get right to it. In the original article, now I didn't see the whole thing because it's behind a paywall, but essentially it was a Spanish magazine, El Mundios, and basically he was saying that there are far too many Marvel movies which are essentially copying and pasting one another. Now, he did make some other statements where he kind of qualified or refined what he was saying, that, for what they are, as Marvel movies, they are fine, but they seem very uncreative. They just seem to follow a very basic pattern. And a director here and there can do better or worse with that given framework, but you're stuck with that framework. So, on the one hand, he was slightly disrespectful to the MCU and its house style, because that's the problem. There is no denying the MCU has a house style. There is no denying that Marvel films almost always operate within a certain range. So he really wasn't saying anything devastating in that respect. It's kind of like, yeah, we all knew that. But the way he put it, I think, was a little abrasive. And apparently Neil and some others really took it in a bad light, that he was just dismissing the entire genre of superhero films, or even the attempt to do kind of fantasy at a certain level. And he was really being specific about Marvel is having not a very positive effect on filmmaking, but we're sort of stuck with it. It is going to be here. So we should just recognize what it is doing and what it is not doing. Now, what do I think? Well, this isn't exactly Martin Scorsese, right? With Scorsese, it was very, very direct that you cannot consider this cinema at all, period. It just is not cinema. Don't use that measuring rod. It's ridiculous to think that. Denis is, I think, going very far down that line, but he's not going all the way. Again, his comments were very specific about Marvel, although, again, you could read it as a broader thing about the superhero genre, but I don't see anything where he says an auteur or a filmmaker cannot do something amazing within the genre. I mean, you look at Christopher Nolan, clearly you can, but A, that's not his thing in the first place, and B, just the constraints Marvel has within itself as a company is going to disallow that. And I think, unfortunately, the recent What If with the zombies kind of proves his point ironically. He even used the word zombie in the interview. And that is that, yeah, I mean, like, I'm not going to do a full-blown review, but essentially the zombie episode was fine. It is what you would expect. Oh, the Marvel universe becomes filled with zombies. Okay, nice. You watch it, you enjoy it, it was good. Is it the greatest thing ever made? Is it the most creative thing? No. Is it the least creative? No. It's just kind of in the middle. Like Black Widow, I think, is a little above average. Probably Shang-Chi is a little higher, and the Wasp are lower than that, and so on and so forth. It just seems to always be stuck in a certain range. And so far, Kevin Feige has really only allowed a few experiments, and even there, it's been very, very tentative. So I don't see much wrong with Denis' remarks or why people are getting upset. I mean, he was just stating what I think is the consensus that, yeah, these are fine films in many ways, especially financially, and you really can't get out of that. Films do have to be paid for. They have to make money. They have to make a profit for the whole thing to keep going. But if you're hungry for something very artistic or creative or individualistic or very thoughtful or even, frankly, very funny, that's not the MCU. Everything is about averages. It's like, this is the average plot. These are average performances. These are average stories. These are average jokes. And they come in a very prepackaged format. If you like that, you like these things. If you don't like those things, you're not going to like much of the MCU. And I actually don't like most of the MCU. I really like the comic books much more. I think the comic books that they're stealing the stories from are much better done, are more funny, are more interesting, are more creative. And the MCU is just a very pale shadow of the comic books. But I realize we live in an illiterate culture, and people don't care about books. They don't care about comic books. And they certainly don't care about people who care about books or comic books. That's a very, very small audience. The majority just are very visual, and they don't care if the material is dumbed down, if it fits their prejudices. And that's Kevin Feige in a nutshell. He's done a very good job of attuning himself to his audience. But are these great films? Are these great stories? That's highly debatable. But they are stories. Some of them I do think would qualify as cinematic. But yeah, I think that gap between strong auteur cinema and the MCU is going to remain for quite a while. Denis was not saying anything radical or even totally disrespectful. I mean, he was just being kind of plain and honest that if you want to do amazing cinema, it's going to be very tough to do that within the Marvel universe, at least so far. But maybe things will change. Maybe they'll loosen up the reins and allow more voices in. But thus far, it does seem like it's just going to be very packaged and tame and average for a long time to come. Thanks for listening.